Yeah. Well, this one doesn't have that class.
What?
It doesn't have
Pirkei Avos?
maybe I could check the other binder.
Okay. Strange. Okay. So we spoke yesterday about the Mishnah that says that there's a time for everything. That's not the words of the Mishnah, but the Mishnah talks about the fact that there are four things that it mentions. And these are four things that they're all good, they're all positive, but make sure to do it in the right time. And if you do it in the wrong time, not only you're not accomplishing what you want to, you're actually doing the exact opposite of what the intention is. And these were the four things about don't try to appease your friends when they're very angry at the moment of their heat of their anger. The second thing is don't try to comfort someone when, God forbid, the person just passed away, is right in front of them. And the third thing was not to try to nullify a vow when they just made the vow because they had an emotional outburst. And the third thing is don't try to make a person feel better at the moment of their humiliation, because by you being there and seeing him in his humiliated state, you're actually making it worse. So we spoke yesterday about the pasuk where it says there's a time for everything. So I just wanted to talk about a few of the things here. Let's start with one of them, which is the first one. The first one is don't try to appease your friend in the moment of anger. This? Yeah. So on one hand, there's something here that the Mishnah is talking about, which is actually a very good thing. And it's not just good, but it's something, as we'll soon see, essential. And that is to be forgiving. I did something, I made somebody very angry, and I should make an effort to ask them for forgiveness, to apologize, I'm sorry, what happened. But the Mishnah is saying is just make sure you do it at the right time. Not the moment that they just had this outburst of anger, then whatever you say is just going to bounce back and make things even worse. And therefore the Mishnah says, but I want to talk about the positive end of it, which is in Hebrew, the word for it is mechila, forgiveness. And there's two parts to forgiveness. One part is that if I offended someone, I should ask them for forgiveness. And the other part, if someone offended me, the Torah says I should forgive them. So let's look at page 20 in the booklet. One of the probably strongest statements that's found in the Gemara regarding this subject is number one on the list here, Givainim. Givainim is the name of a tribe. And the Gemara tells us a story, this was in the times of David HaMelech, King David, that there was an incident that they were upset at King Shaul because he killed someone from the tribe, and they killed, I think it was the children of King Shaul, and they pleaded with them they should forgive. And they said, no, they're not going to forgive. And David HaMelech decreed that although according to Torah it's perfectly acceptable that people from other nations convert and become Jewish, but if they come from this tribe, we should not accept them to become Jewish, because if they don't have the nature to forgive, they can't belong to the Jewish nation. In other words, forgiving is so much connected to, I guess, being compassionate and being kind. Now, I don't mean to forgive someone. Of course, it doesn't mean when the person you're talking to looks like they're ready to do it again. Don't subject yourself to abuse, chas v'shalom. But if the person sincerely regrets what happened and sincerely asking for forgiveness, and they need to hear that, because when they hear the forgiveness, it's sort of therapeutic for them, it's healing for them that they did something wrong, and you don't, so in a certain way, you're being very mean to them. And to that extent that these people could not be accepted to join Bnei Yisrael because they don't have in them the attribute to be forgiving. So I also want to add, but if you know that by forgiving somebody, you're actually doing the opposite. You're making them feel comfortable with what they did, and they're ready to come attack you again, then you don't have this obligation to forgive them, which will only be feeding into their criminal acts. So I just want to show you, this is the Torah point of view, number 4. This is what the Torah says. Some people might be very, loving kindness, and they would argue with this, but the Torah is loving and kindness, and this is the Torah's opinion. If someone is, God forbid, coming to kill you, you kill them first. You have to do that in self-defense. I once had a big debate with someone. There was a student here, and her sister came, and she belonged to some group. I'm not sure if it was the Mormons or somewhere, someplace. And she was arguing with me that Israelis are terrible because they kill terrorists. And I said, but these are people who are trying to kill somebody. So who says that your life is more important than theirs? But they're murderers, but that's not the Torah point of view. Somebody is, not only that, but there's another halacha, number 5. If you see somebody, it's called reidiv. You see somebody pursuing another person with a gun or a knife to kill them, you have an obligation to kill the murderer who's running after them. Of course, if you can stop them in other ways, in other words, you can stop them by injuring their legs or something else, then God forbid, you're not allowed to kill them. But if the only way you can stop them is by killing them, then you have an obligation to kill them, because they're the ones who are pursuing the other person to kill that person. So on a smaller scale, of course, forgiving is very important, but not if by me forgiving, the person is not sincere, it's not genuine. And by me saying, I forgive you, it just gives them the green light to keep hitting me, keep abusing me. So it's a very hard thing. Someone hurt me, hurt my feelings, and I should say I forgive. But this is one of the areas where we have to work on ourselves and our character traits. Again, if the other person is asking for forgiveness in a sincere way. By the way, you might have learned about this in Halacha, because in Yom Kippur it says Hashem doesn't forgive us unless the person that we hurt forgives me. In other words, if I, let's say, desecrated Shabbos and ask Hashem for forgiveness, Hashem forgives me. It's between me and him. But if I hurt another person and I say, Hashem, forgive me, Hashem says, providing that the person forgives you and you ask them for forgiveness and you apologize, then I'll forgive you. So what happens, I'll get to you in a second, if you go to a person and you ask them for forgiveness and they say no. So the halach is you should ask them 3 times. If you ask them 3 times for forgiveness and they still don't forgive you, then it's off your shoulders, it's on their shoulders. And Hashem forgive you. Is that what you want to ask? Okay. On target. Okay. Number 3 is Midah Keneged Midah. This is another thing to take into account. I just read the story the other day that there was a woman who committed something which was sinful, very inappropriate. Of course, nobody knew about it, but she came to a certain tzaddik and asked him for a bracha. The tzaddik has open eyes and he knows everything. So he started to scream at her, "Leave my room. You sinful person, you're coming here to me, to my room?" And she said to him, "I don't understand. God is so tolerant of all people that are sinful, and even people that are doing it for who knows how long. And you, just one time you saw me and you really can't tolerate me anymore?" And then he said, "You're right." We are turning to Hashem every day and say, "Hashem, forgive me." So what happens if someone comes to me and says, "Forgive me"? I say, "No." Then I turn to Hashem, "Hashem, forgive me." So I am being like a hypocrite. When it comes to other people asking me for forgiveness, I say no. When it comes to Hashem, I'm asking Hashem to forgive me. So this is another added element, that by me forgiving other people, this has an effect that on account of that and in that merit, Hashem will forgive me sooner. On the other hand, if I don't forgive another person for doing something, again, when they're asking forgiveness sincerely and in a genuine way, then chas v'shalom, that could trigger that because of this, Hashem does measure for measure. Hashem says, "You didn't forgive him, so I won't forgive you." Of course, you might be asking, but how could you forgive somebody who did something terrible? Somebody was instrumental in you losing your job. Just give me an example. So because of them, I lost my job. I'm supposed to forgive them? They did such a terrible thing. How could you make sense of that? Any suggestions? Yeah.
You trust that somehow they were Hashem's shliach and changing your direction?
On target. In other words, basically, we believe that nothing happens to a person unless it comes from Hashem. Which means, even if another person does something to me, and that person has free choice, so they're doing it because they chose to do something bad. But the fact that I was affected by it must be from Hashem, otherwise it couldn't have happened. So ultimately, I mean, of course, it's a very, very hard thing to feel when you're hurting, especially if somebody hurts you in a very deep way. But if I realize that everything is from Hashem, and this person was just sort of the agent. Now the Rebbe adds another thing. Let's say, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say somebody stole $100 from me. So they did it because they chose, and they'll be punished for what they did. But I say to myself, the fact that I lost $100, it must be that this is what Hashem wanted. It was decreed. Which means if they wouldn't have chosen to steal my money, I would have lost it some other way. If it was meant to happen, it would have been happening another way. If he wouldn't do it, someone else would have done it. I would have lost it by dropping it on without noticing. Something else would have happened. So I guess if we have a strong emunah that really everything is coming from Hashem, besides the fact that this helps us not to lose our temper, not to be angry, and all that, it'll also help us when it comes to forgiving, because we realize that really it's Hashem. Like somebody once hurt someone else's feelings, so the other guy got angry and he punched him in the face. So there was a rabbi watching it, so he said, "Really, you wanted to punch Hashem in the face, but you can't do that." So he punched him. Yeah.
What if you say to someone, "You really hurt me, you owe me an apology," and they said, "I'm just a shliach for Hashem. If it wasn't meant to happen, it wouldn't have happened."
No, that's unacceptable. No, because they didn't do it because they're shliach for Hashem. They did it because they are evil.
But it still came from Hashem.
That's my business. That's between me and Hashem. Between me and you should ask for forgiveness and apologize. By the way, you're not so far off. There are people that actually say that. After they hurt you, they say, "Listen, it's from Hashem," right? So that's for me to think about it. It's from Hashem, and to realize what should be my perspective. For the one that did it, taking the blame of themselves and not asking Hashem for tshuva or asking for forgiveness, that's totally wrong because they did it out of their evil choice. So there's a term found in Gemara. It's on the sheet number 2, number 6, number 7, which says that a person should be, it's called Maiver Amidaisav, just to be familiar with the Torah terms, which means a person should be able to overcome their natural impulses of their midas. The normal impulse when someone hurts me to be angry at them or to hurt them or to scream at them, or they abuse me, so I'll abuse them. And the Torah says, don't take any revenge and don't react. Again, only if you have to do something in self-defense, that's different. But to just get back at them because they hurt me, that's not the Torah way. And the Gemara says that those people that they hear their insults but they don't answer, or they're shamed by someone and they don't return shame to the other person, it says that when the Mashiach comes, Hashem will take the sun out of its case and he'll shine his light to them. It's a metaphor, meaning that they'll have the brightest light of Hashem shining on them as a reward, because this is definitely a difficult thing to handle. And on the other side of the page, page 21, it's really connected to another mission, so maybe we'll wait with that. But number 22 is also connected to this. In Hebrew, there's one of the character traits, which is a negative character trait, is called nakama. Nakama means revenge. Revenge is prohibited according to Torah. Revenge is a very destructive kind of emotion where you want to take revenge. And I think everyone knows that revenge often can go as far as murder, where people have such a fire burning of revenge that to hurt someone, to get back at them, to put them into trouble. And unfortunately, very often, revenge leads even to murder. So there are two mitzvahs in the Torah, two commandments. One is called leisikam, do not take revenge, and one is leisiter. We had it not long ago in the Parsha. Anyone here familiar what the difference is? They're both about not taking revenge, but one is different than the other.
What?
One is leisikam, do not take revenge, and one is leisiter, do not bear a grudge in your heart. Yeah.
So I've heard it explained that revenge is like two neighbors, two neighboring farmers are talking. One asks to borrow the other one's tools. One of the other guy says to him, no. So first farmer, the next day when he's asked for his tools, he says, no, I'm not going to give you my tools because
You didn't give me. That's revenge.
That's revenge. But the grudge is if he says, oh, of course I'll give you my tools because unlike some people, I'm a nice person. That's a grudge.
Right. That's exactly what it is. In other words, the second person is not taking revenge. I'm lending you my tools, but I'm telling you, I'm not like you. I'm different than you. I will be nice. So you're bearing the grudge in your heart. Both are considered one of the 365 negative commandments.
Wow.
And of course, we all know the story how the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The famous story with Kamsa Bar Kamsa, that was about revenge. He was sitting at a party, and he came there by mistake. He thought he was invited, and he really wasn't. And the owner of the party said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, your messenger invited me." And he said, "That was a mistake, and leave the room." And he said, "Please don't humiliate me here in front of everybody. I'll pay you for all the food that I eat." And he said, "No, I want you to leave."
Wow.
So he said, "Please, I'll pay you for half of all the expenses." He says, "No, I want you to leave." And he tried a third time. He said, "I'll pay you for all the expenses." And here he lost his patience. He grabbed him by the collar and he schlepped him out of the room as if he was a cat or a dog. And he was so furious. He said, imagine there were rabbis there, nobody stopped him. He went to the Roman emperor and he told him the Jews are planning a revolt against you. And what did it lead to? The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people being killed. And what was motivating him? Revenge. Yeah.
Which one was the one that was not supposed to be invited?
Kamsa Bar Kamsa. So
Wait, one person?
he wanted to invite Kamsa, but instead the one who showed up was Bar Kamsa. I guess that's how we made a mistake, because the names are similar. The question though is, you find certain places, especially in Tillim, the David HaMelech seems to be saying that I hate my enemies, and he gives them brachas like who knows what. So the truth is, even in davening, what do you do when you come to that part in davening where it says, the informers, they should be uprooted and be eliminated and all that, and you're actually cursing them. So the answer is that if you look at Mefarshim commentary on these areas, especially in Chassidus, it says that the hate was not to the person, but to the klipa that was the motivating force, the driving force, forcing this person to do evil. Tzaddikim don't hate people, they hate klipa. And all the curses are for the klipa. It should be eliminated, it should be uprooted, it should be gone. In fact, if you learn the basics of Chassidus, you probably know that there are 3 klippas that are total klippa. And the 4th one is called klipat noga. It's light and klippa. So in the Mashinim, you actually say, sa'aker, shaber, mager, use 3 words. That's to uproot the 3 klippas. And the last one, b'sachliya, you should subdue, is the 4th one, which is light and darkness together. So there's a famous story in Gemara. I'm looking at page 21 now, where it says, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. Because we shouldn't be happy, God forbid, for anybody failing and getting hurt. And when it says, I hate them with the ultimate hatred, Alter Rebbe explains, it's not the person, it's the klipa in the person. And number 3, when it says, let there be no hope for informers, it's the same thing. Number 4 is a pasuk in Tillim. You can look it up. It's the last verse in chapter 104. And there's a story behind it. The story is that one of the greatest sages, his name was Rabbi Meir. And he was so great, the rabbis say that the rabbis of his generation couldn't fully understand him because he was far, far superior to all of them. He had a wife who was a great Torah scholar herself. And her name was Bruria, right? And it was once, and many times she would make him aware of certain things and point things out to him because she was also a great Torah scholar. One time, he had 2 neighbors who were very wicked people, and they were causing him a lot of aggravation. And she overheard her husband davening that Hashem should take them away. So she said to him, look at Tehillim, where it says, Yitamu chatoyim, that it says, and sin shall be eliminated from the world. She doesn't say sinners, it says sin should be eliminated. In other words, not the people, the sin should be eliminated. Why are you praying that they should be taken away? Pray that the sin and the klipa that causes all that, that should be taken away.
Rabbi Majeski.
Yeah.
But it's not the sins that go to Gehenna, it's the sinners who go to Gehenna for the 11 months.
They go to Gehenna for 11 months, but Gehenna is not Hashem taking revenge. Unfortunately, there's this notion that Gehenna means Hashem says, okay, just wait till you guys come up here. I'll take care of you. Now I'll get back at you. But Hashem is chesed and kindness and love. So the way we understand Gehenna is that Gehenna is just a process of cleansing. It's sort of a healing process for the soul to enable the soul to go into Gan Eden. That's why, generally speaking, you don't say Kaddish for a person that passed away for more than 11 months. Because the Gemara says, in the worst case scenario, person did really a lot of evil, even if by 11 months they've been cleaned and they're healed. And what happens after that? Then they go into Gan Eden. So in other words, it's like a person who goes through a rehabilitation that he can be able to continue a productive life. So the Gehenna is actually no different than the other, like a medical procedure or other kind of procedures that heal the person so they can be able to have a good quality of life.
What about the story about how, was it Rabbi Akiva? Somebody saved like 72,000 people from Gehenna. So why did they need to be saved if they were just in a cleansing process that was helpful?
It's a cleansing process, but it's still painful. In other words, if a person has to go through a surgery because he has a problem somewhere in his body, his heart, his kidneys, his lungs, and someone comes along and does something and says, I'll just go like that, and you won't need the surgery, you'll be healed without it. Everybody would go for it. Because what you're doing is you're bringing the benefits without the pain and the suffering, and that's what it means. Rabbi Akiva was actually the one that taught the idea of Kaddish, that Kaddish could help. And what it means is that instead of the person, God forbid, have to suffer by saying Kaddish, it prevents the person from suffering. And then the neshama can have the cleansing through the Kaddish in an unsuffering way. Now it says, don't try to be nice to a person when he's humiliated. So just to give an example of that, if you remember when we did Pirkei Avos chapter 2, it speaks about that one of the highest levels of tzedakah is when you give tzedakah to a person, but they don't know where it's coming from. Why? Because imagine a person who has no money and he's suffering and he has to actually collect. It's very humiliating. And now when you give him money, it's very nice that you give him the money, but he is humiliated that you see him in this state. So that's another reason why it's better to give the tzedakah in a way that he doesn't know where it's coming from. He doesn't even realize that you know that he's so poor and he's so in such a bad situation. So he doesn't have to go through more humiliation. So it means even when you want to help someone, you have to make every effort to help the person, but in a way that he's not humiliated by me helping. Sometimes he'll get up and say, everybody in the shul should know, Mr. So-and-so has no money. He's losing his apartment. Please, everybody help and give him money. He might faint right on the spot because it's so humiliating. You want to help him, but not in a way that you're humiliating the person. I guess if I'm doing it because I want to be a good person, then you don't think much about it. But if you're doing it because you care about the person's suffering, then you will make every effort and really invest yourself to think of how can I do this in the most sensitive way. Because the bottom line, I'm here to prevent this person from suffering. And that's what it's all about. Okay, I think we're ready to do another Mishnah. We have a few little short minutes. So, I'm going to go back. We're going to go now to go back to a Mishnah in chapter 4, Mishnah 4. We skipped it before. Go back to it. I see we don't have enough time to do the whole parak, so I'm just going to choose those Mishnahs that are a little bit more practically relevant. Rabbi Levitas Ish Yavna. The name of the sage was Rabbi Levitas, and he came from a place called Yavna, and he said, Ma'oid ma'oid havishfar ruach, which means be exceedingly, exceptionally humble. Shetikvas en shrima, because at the end, what happens to a person is nothing but worms. That's all that comes of the body. And then there's another piece, but I want to talk about this a little bit. And that is the attribute that we're talking about here is obviously humility. Not to be arrogant, to be humble. But what does it mean? Why does it say ma'oid ma'oid? You should be very, very humble. So the Rambam explains it in the following way. Again, if you remember in the beginning of chapter 2, we went through an entire chapter of Rambam. The Rambam says that even good character traits, even good things we do, we should do it in moderation, not to go to extremes. When you take things to an extreme, it could become counterproductive. And the example he gave is tzedakah. Imagine a person who's extreme in tzedakah. He gives away all his money, and then he has no money for his family, for his wife, for his children. So it's a good thing to give tzedakah, but not to such an extreme. And if someone says, yeah, you're right, I have to care about my family, and therefore they tighten their hands and they don't give any tzedakah to make sure that his family has what they need, that's also no good. That's an extreme. So the right place to be is balanced, somewhere in the middle. The Rambam says a person should be b'simcha. So does it mean that you're dancing and singing all day long, whoever you see in the street, you start dancing with them? No, not a good idea. That's extreme. On the other hand, to be serious and no smile on your face and it's heavy, also not a good idea. So a person should be somewhere in the middle, which means you're serious. Life there's a lot of serious things in life, but you're light and you're lighthearted and you're feeling good and you're not depressed and you're not down, so on. So he goes through a whole list of things. Then the Rambam says there's an exception. What's the exception? Arrogance. Arrogance is something that should go to the extreme to be humble, not to be arrogant. Because arrogance is such a destructive character trait that in this case, it's okay to go to the extreme because you have to sort of eradicate it completely. And that is because arrogance really is at the root of almost all the evil things that people do. It's all based on the fact that they're very much into themselves and very much into their ego. And that leads to jealousy, and that leads to competition, and that leads to looking with a bad eye at other people, putting other people down. That even leads to depression, because the more arrogant you are, the more depressed you are. And the list goes on and on and on. And it could even be early in the year, I went through a whole list of major, primary negative character traits, and they all are a result of arrogance, of the ego. So therefore, it says, Ma'id ma'id, heavy shval ruach, should be very, very humble, which means when it comes to humility, you should go to the extreme. Again, extreme doesn't mean that I go down on the floor and tell people to step on me, but extreme means to be extremely conscious that when I do things, I should try to do it for the right reason, because it's true, because it's honest, because it's ethical, and not because it inflates my ego. And then we are pretty safe. Okay, to be continued.
Thank you so much.
One more class, Pirkei Avos, next week, Tuesday. Yeah, you're allowed to continue learning Pirkei Avos, but the class.
Chabad's the only sect that learns Pirkei Avos until Rosh Hashanah.
Not the only, but a lot of people do, a lot of people don't. Chabad itself didn't do it until about maybe 40 years ago. We used to just do this in Pesach Shavuos.